My name is Joanna Salinas. I am the outreach coordinator with the Waukesha County Green Team. If you are unfamiliar with us, we are a nonprofit located here in Waukesha County in Wisconsin, because I know sometimes we have participants from all over the country, which is the great thing about Zoom. We really focus on promoting environmental and economic sustainability within the county, and we do that through education, collaboration, and local action. And we're going to ask everyone to stay muted this evening because there's so many of us, and otherwise there'll be some background noises. And we're going to ask if you have questions for Carolyn and Rich at any time during the presentation, just type them right into the chat. So the way we'll do this is Rich will present for about 30 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. Let's see. So I would love to introduce to you Carolyn and Richard. They're members of our permaculture and gardening team. So the way the Waukesha County Green Team organizes is kind of around geographic locations or interests. And we have a very large and active group who's very interested in gardening and permaculture, and they get together to learn and to plan educational events for all of us. So Carolyn, welcome. I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Well, thank you, and welcome to everyone. This is session 2, actually, insights from Rich about growing sweet potatoes. And for those who missed our last session, this is a sneak peek of his beautiful garden. Imagine, look at that. And
we eat well.
Yes, Rich is an educator and a very accomplished artist. And his garden, as well as his art, is a delight to the eyes. Imagine going outside and looking at this, and this is just a little snapshot of his yard. It's just so amazing. So we're going to have an exciting time tonight picking his brain. So thank you, Rich, for inviting us to your garden.
It's okay.
The plants are so lush and beautiful. They take your breath away. They're so beautiful. And now Rich is going to start by sharing his secrets. And his first one, of course, is hidden under the snow.
I'm presently working on this pile that you see right in the middle of that slide. It's under snow right back there where Carolyn is flying that cursor around. And the secret there is very simply leaves. Lots and lots and lots of leaves. Carolyn, would you please toggle back one slide?
I sure could.
Check out between these plants. How many of you want to use your hula hoe and get down on your knees and start pulling crap? Not me, I'm old. And so if you look between all of these plants, what you see is leaves, leaf litter. I use it exclusively as mulch. How deep? I'm glad you asked. At least 3 inches going up to 6 inches. And the reason, you can toggle ahead now, Carolyn.
Okay.
See that pile back there? Whoop, too far.
Whoop.
That pile back there is getting weighted down by snow. The pile used to be as tall as the tallest garden fence. And the snow weight is matting them down. And that's part of the secret. Come springtime, that pile is maybe a foot even lower than what you see right there. So when I plant in the springtime, I'll just go out there and grab a whole bunch of leaves that have been matted down. It's almost so tightly woven together and matted that the weeds just can't pop themselves through that stuff. And you might say to yourself, okay, if that's the case, aren't you smothering the ground? No, you're not smothering the ground at all. You're preserving moisture. You get a few slugs underneath there, but that's what toads and frogs will go looking for. The leaves break down over the course of the year. They break down so well. Stop and think of the forest floor. Where'd all those leaves go? They turn to dirt. And so leaves are my go-to mulch. Now, people have said you can use straw. Sure, you can, but you better go a foot or more higher because straw is kind of pervious to sunlight. Sunlight will get through straw. And leaves, because they're matted together, seems to work best for me. And I would definitely ask that all of you try the mulching method of some sorts. There's many different kinds of mulch. Wood chips will break down a lot slower, and they will require a little bit more moisture and nitrogen to break down thoroughly. Leaves, I've found over the past many years, are the best for me, but I think you guys ought to try your own leaf methods. Okay, Carolyn, let's go.
All right.
There's the dirt hill where I'm starting to move some of the dirt away, and you can see where the tubers for sweet potatoes grow right below the plants that are in the top of that mound up there along the top edge. That's only one of the tubers out of many that I've collected this past year. This year was a slow year. It was a cold spring and a short growing season, but it got really hot, which is what sweet potatoes really like. And I've got a couple of methods later on to show you how to keep the heat in your ground to help the sweet potatoes grow. But I got about 20 pounds of sweet potatoes off of 7 plants this year. And I think Carolyn got 22 pounds off of how many plants, Carolyn?
12 plants.
12 plants.
Yeah.
So as you can see, it's a pretty good harvest in the north where sweet potatoes are not typically grown by people. But we're going to share with you a bunch of techniques that will help you grow sweet potatoes, if you like them, in your garden. Sweet potatoes grown from pieces of sweet potatoes. Cuttings called slips. Yeah. If you go to the grocery store, you're going to have to buy yourself some organic sweet potatoes. And I'm hoping that they work all right. Many sweet potatoes and other vegetables that are grown around here locally will sprout if they're organic. And you can see the sprouts off of these guys right here. Those things are called slips. So what you do is you break those off when they're a couple of inches tall, and you stick them in water like that. You can see a couple of them starting to grow off of a sweet potato I've got in the sun in the springtime. This is probably about April where they've started to grow, and they grow even further into May. And I just stick them into a little bit of water. A little bit of water encourages each of those slips, excuse me, to grow roots. And you want to develop those roots as best you possibly can. If you take a look into that jar there, you can see how the sweet potato slip has just taken off and started to make big leaves and make all kinds of roots. And I even brought one of those to show you here today too.
Wow.
Now that one that I just showed you came off of another way to preserve your sweet potatoes from year to year. Because I'm a teacher, I know that anything that can go wrong will go wrong eventually. And so at the end of the year, I take some of my best vine tips. So my sweet potatoes are ready to get harvested. I've ripped off all the vines, but I go back into the pile of ripped off vines and I select the shortest, best tips, the ones that have the most leaves very, very close together. And all of those tips that are real short like that can be rooted in water. And you can see there that there's a whole bunch of roots coming off of those things. Now, how do you keep them over the winter? You might ask. Stick them in dirt. There we got a big bunch in the dirt right back here. Those are going to grow in my house all winter long. Now, to prevent them from getting all kinds of growth all over your living room, just snip the tips off. That's all you got to do. You treat it like any other house plant. You just snip it back until it's got a nice base in the dirt. And in the springtime, you can snip those things off and you can put them in your garden and they'll grow like crazy. Part of what we're talking to you about today has to do with how you're going to start your own supply of sweet potato starts or slips. It's very difficult to find a good variety of sweet potatoes for the northern climate. So I'm going to read off to you a list I did a long time ago. I went digging in my notes. Again, teacher thing, keep notes. I tried a whole bunch of varieties: Patriot, New Jersey, Orange Oak Leaf, Bradshaw, Ginseng Red, California Gold, Beauregard, Purple, excuse me, Garnet. I tried all kinds of sweet potatoes that are available on the marketplace to buy a long time ago. And I found out the one that really worked the best in my area right around here is called Georgia Jet. So if you plan on getting sweet potatoes, I would recommend buying one that's called Georgia Jet. Where do you get it? Again, I'm glad you asked. Look for seed catalogs or online providers that are close to you so that the mail doesn't take a long time for you to get what is called slips grown by growers. And usually they'll send them to you in June. And June is not too late. You can still put sweet potatoes into the ground up until the middle of June, and they'll still give you sweet potatoes by the end of the year. All of those varieties I read you off this list from long ago, I tried. You know, I'm a little scientist here, kind of keeping notes of what works and what doesn't. And all of the ones I read to you will give you sweet potatoes that look like a carrot or a thumb. That's all the bigger they got, except for Georgia Jet. Georgia Jet produced an actual real life sweet potato that measured about 6 inches by about 4 inches. It made a real nice one. And so I continued to propagate that in my own dirt, in my own climate area here in the Dousman area. And it works wonderfully. So here we get to, once you've got your sweet potatoes in the springtime, if you don't have your own supply, like, you know, come on over, I'll give you a cutting of this and you can try it in water. When you get it from these provider, from the seed company or from the grower that gives you these slips, right now is a good time to prepare your garden for these things to occur next year. Choose a warm spot, make a raised mound 6 to 10 inches high. This is my own personal method, by the way. Carolyn tried another one. She'll tell you all about hers as well. The reason I raise up a mound is so that I don't have to go spading and digging into flat ground. I like my mounds raised up. That way I can just grab into the side of that mound for a sweet potato instead of digging up a hole in the dirt. And there's more tips on how to do this as well. Each rooted cutting is spaced about 6 to 10 inches apart. I always use this method when I'm planting things, either a fist or a fist and a thumb. Now that depends on your hand size too. You could use a tape measure as well, but give it some reasonable distance. Kind of close your eyes and do a Zen thing like, oh, I wonder how big this thing is gonna get. Maybe that's much space I ought to have, okay? You can kind of figure this stuff out. So anyway, I've made my mound. It's nice and clean. I don't have to worry about weeds because I've mulched with leaf, but I'm going to even ensure myself more weed protection with some black plastic on the top of my mound. I'm going to cover that mound a week or two before the planted cuttings go in place. This is raising the temperature of the soil in the springtime. No matter what in our area, the springtime nighttime temperatures actually cools the top surface of the soil. So why not protect it a little bit? Cover it up with something dark like this. You can see my mound there even extends away from the central mound about 2 feet on either side. Now there's another tip in this picture too. Wherever I've put that mound, I figure out where I'm going to put these sweet potato plantings, and I put rocks in place right where those sweet potatoes are going to get stuck into the plastic. And that is because they gather sun all day long, no matter what. They keep the heat and they release it slowly at night. The size of the stones depends on your ability to lift things. If you don't want to lift too much, you put about a 2-pound rock in place right on either side of where your plantings are going to be going. So there you can see I've even used rocks, and then sometimes I'll use a garden stake to hold down. What you see here is the erosion control fencing. Saw some on the side of the road, grabbed it, it was free, and you just used it. But you can use black plastic as well. lighter covered fabrics don't work as well. And I've heard people try red colored fabric. Fine, go ahead and try it. What the heck? My idea is simply to heat the dirt and protect it from getting weeds. You can see there that there's even more leaves floating around, the ones that are from this year. They're sort of drying out a little bit. At the time I harvested, I'm thinking it was probably about the end of July, beginning of August, somewhere in there, or maybe it was in the middle of August. It's kind of hard to tell when to harvest your sweet potatoes. So you peel back your plant, your black plastic, and you just start reaching underneath there into the soil, because it'll be real light and friable. It won't be all dried out and clay-like. It'll be soft because of the black plastic is keeping moisture in there. If you reach inside and you start feeling around for potatoes, you can kind of judge the size of those sweet potatoes and figure out when to harvest. You want them to have decent harvest size. So that's 7 plants, believe it or not. You can see there's a great big garden stake holding down some of the black plastic that's there. And if you look all around there, check out the leaves. They don't look like leaves anymore. Well, that's because I've been stepping on them and they're crumbling. They're turning to dirt little by little by little. And of course, you see a volunteer dill plant in there. I haven't planted dill in 20 years. I just keep letting them grow. And whenever they grow, I'll just grab a bunch of dill whenever I need it and stick it in the refrigerator for pickling time. Harvest around September. Oh, yeah, somewhere in there. Scratching the mounds, dig in with a pitchfork before frost hits the vine. Frost can kill that plant. It can also kill your sweet potatoes. So my wife tells me don't grow as many, but I'm always worried that something will get in there and eat things. So I grow as many as I can and share the rest. Frost can damage vines, and you don't want the frost to damage the vines, because then that'll travel down to the potatoes. You can see where I've scratched away a bunch of dirt here, and you can reveal some of the sweet potatoes that are underneath. And you will get thumb-sized ones, you'll get carrot-sized ones, but you'll also get some baseballs. And usually every year I get a football. The growing season, just, the plant wants to do this. Be nice to the plant will be nice to you. That was a harvest on a 4x8 sheet of plywood. I think that was 2 years ago. You can see a glove at the top to give you a relative size of how big those sweet potatoes are. There's a whole bunch of little fingerlings over on the upper right there and way down in the lower left. It's kind of fun to measure the poundage of your harvest just to see how well the plants did. But again, Georgia Jet is my favorite, and planting underneath black plastic on a mound is my favorite because it seems to keep the weeds down, keeps the moisture in. Leaves protect the plants from getting weeds all intrusive in there. And once they're harvested, you really should cure them. And I don't know if that's coming up real soon here. Oh yeah, there it is. I repurposed an old refrigerator many years ago, and I used to smoke fish and meat in there, but it's just been hanging around. And so I decided to make this into a sweet potato curing cabinet. And the reason for this is when sweet potatoes are first harvested, they're very sensitive to scratching, very sensitive to the environment. If you throw them in a wheelbarrow, they're going to get dented and scratched and scraped, and that poses the potential of getting them rotted. That's not good. And so to cure them, the secret is keep them at 90 degrees temperature at about 90% humidity. So if you look inside this old refrigerator, which has some ventilation, you can see on the left side there, there's some very simple holes with louvers in them. That's to keep the mice out, but it also increases the air circulation within there. At the very bottom, you can see an old 100-watt lamp, and that points straight up to a little silver pan in the middle of the smoker. I keep that filled with water. So the heat inside the refrigerator evaporates the moisture in the pan for the potatoes on the racks above. And what happens after 1 week is that the skins on the sweet potatoes get redder and deeper, and the flesh inside gets sweeter. Oh, tasty. And that's the kind of thing you want. It also increases the durability of the skins. The skins get tougher, but they're still good to eat if you bake them. And so what you're doing in the curing process is finishing the curing, or finishing the, how do I say this? You're finishing the plant's desire to give you the best fruit possible. So that toughens them up and it makes them sweeter. And some people say you can put them in the basement, but it takes like 8 months or so to do them without this first process. I tried that too, and they were never as sweet. Once I cure them, I store them in the basement, 50 or 60 degrees on a shelf near the floor. They go like that all winter, and some of them may sprout by May. Now here's something that happened this year. One of the sweet potato footballs, I just left because we didn't have any parties, right? COVID, we're sequestered. So the football eventually started to put out those little slips, those little growth things, but it didn't do so until July. And Karen, is that sweet potato still downstairs? So I broke off a couple of those slips, brought them upstairs and stuck them in water, got them rooted and stuck them in the garden. Now those sweet potatoes didn't get full water, the ones that were started earlier. So I planted them in July, but the ones that I planted in June were still the ones that gave me that 22 pounds of sweet potatoes. The one that I planted later was a smaller plant, and they gave me some carrot size ones. So there you have it. When I put these things in my window in the winter time, they don't get much more than 2 hours of sun. So it's not very sun dependent of a plant. There's a bunch of vines after the harvest. You can see that they grow on vines like you wouldn't believe it, like 8 feet long. And they'll twist and they'll twine and they'll do all kinds of things, but they also help prevent weeds. Unfortunately, sometimes they will attract critters. You want to tell anybody about that, Carolyn?
Yes, yes. But first I wanted you to notice that, look at the roots that have formed at each leaf nodule. I think it's so exciting. This plant is so strong. It's amazing. And those actually I started after I harvested. So those are now in my home waiting for next season. So note how easy it is to save your cuttings from your plants. And you are growing slips that are acclimatized to your own garden's microclimate, and you're creating a product that is healthier than those that you buy. So most of the time, this is my experience, the slips that are shipped in the mail, by the time they arrive, they're really in bad condition. And so you have to revive them before you even can plant them. So you're saving a lot of money by using the cuttings from your own plants. So I get to tell you about the challenges I had in my growing season. And of course, it's always good to share challenges because gardening keeps us humble, right? We're always in the posture of learning. So look at this. Oh my goodness. So even though I had, a harvest of 22 pounds, I had a huge village of moles or voles, even mice that had decided to make their village under the vines. And the vines were so beautiful. I had no idea that these critters were living underneath. And so look at all my sweet potatoes that got eaten by them. They just had a ball. They thought I grew it for them. So I talked to Rich about it, and he was telling me, okay, a possible solution is to put down 1/2 by 1/2 by 12-inch wire on both sides of the slip plantings under the black plastic. So the critters have to dig pretty far to get to the potatoes. And I also saw this idea that you could put a hardware cloth screwed tightly to the raised beds. if that's what you're using, your method. In fact, I used a raised bed, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do Rich's method this next season and just plant them in the ground, because I think that they really loved having a raised bed. It was nice and dark under there. So, and note here, you know, how the use of the black plastic over the soil, and then the potatoes start peeking out, and the hardware cloth worked for these folks that did that. So that might be a really good method for you to do if you want to do it in raised beds. So now it is time to share and ask questions. We really look forward to your questions, and we look forward to learning from you, because I'm sure that maybe some of you have grown sweet potatoes and have some experiences to share, and tell us what you've learned. So put your questions in the chat, and Joanna's going to share them with us.
Sure. Well, there are a couple questions already, and thank you so much for all of this tremendous information. It looks like growing them inside would just be a lot of fun to do with my kids. I think we're going to give it a shot in the winter, and then to be able to take it outside. How fun is that?
Yeah.
So the first question is, would the vines climb a trellis? And is there any advantage to that?
I've never tried it. I would imagine it would save some garden dirt if you did try that. I don't know how well they would adhere to the vine, adhere to the trellis, other than telling you it's a vine, and so it'll wrap around things sort of like a pole bean as it crawls higher and higher and higher. I don't know if it would be any better or not.
Okay. All right. And then Gloria wants to know what to plant as companions to sweet potatoes.
Nothing can get near it. It spreads out on the ground so far.
Okay.
It's just,
Right.
It becomes an umbrella. It just grows further and further from the main plant that's in the middle. It just keeps expanding itself. If there was anything to grow along with it, I would suggest beans, bush beans.
Okay. Bush beans. Okay. All right.
But plan on them getting overrun.
Sure. So Mary shared that in the past, she's planted sweet potatoes in the ground, just like you, Richard, and then this year moved them to raised beds, but still had damage from mice. So, but Mary's looking forward to trying to grow her own slips, which is great. All right, from Sarah, she says the curing process seems like a difficult environment to create. Must it be done, and for how long must it be done?
You can do this in your basement, but the basics remain. I use an old refrigerator, but that's a giant device. If you go in the basement and build yourself well, let's say from like an argument, okay, find yourself a big cardboard box, or a wooden box, or a closet. Find some place that you can enclose an area and safely light a light so it doesn't start anything on fire. Have water be heated up, and let the light heat the water with your sweet potatoes in an enclosed environment, wherever that may be, for a week. Now, I suppose you could do it in your oven, depending on how many potatoes you got and when you want to use your oven. Could you take them out and put them on the countertop, use your oven, and then go back to doing it again? Sure, as long as you're working in a 100-degree or less oven. So this refrigerator is just because I'm repurposing something. But
Sure.
What could we find that you could use that would be a small enough container where you could have a pan of water being heated up so that the humidity rises into this enclosed area of sorts that you create? I wonder about a Weber grill. Would a Weber grill do something like that? Maybe, depending on how many potatoes you have harvested. So this is kind of like a challenge. What container could you make or find that would be fireproof because of the light and the heat and all? You don't want it to heat up too much so you're cooking the potatoes. you'd have to be checking on this with a thermometer and a hygrometer if it's your first time to try it, so that you can cure the sweet potatoes. It only takes a week. So there's your challenge. What can you find that'll do the job?
Okay, we're gonna put that out as a challenge, so that'll be great. I didn't even know before that you had to cure sweet potatoes, so that's a really good lesson for me.
Well, you don't have to cure them, but there's a difference in flavor. There's a difference in
Okay.
durability. If you
Yeah.
cure them, that's best. If you don't cure them, they won't be quite as sweet. They'll be a little bit more apt for damage.
Sure. Okay. Are there any insects that would attack sweet potato vines or the tuber itself?
Japanese beetles eat everything. I haven't had too much damage though, because I have trap plants. The Japanese beetles go for wild grapes first, lilacs second, raspberries third, and then beans. My pole beans suffer damage from Japanese beetles, and then finally the sweet potatoes.
Okay.
No Colorado beetles, no bean beetles, and my hornets usually take care of a few of those things.
Okay.
And they're so prolific that even if some Japanese beetles get on them, it doesn't destroy the plant. You know, it's okay. Yeah. So don't worry too much about Japanese beetles.
Okay. Okay.
If anybody has chickens, chickens usually eat Japanese beetles. All you got to do is sweep them into a pot of water and put that pot of water right in your chicken pen, and the chickens will eat them like crazy.
Oh, all right. Good to know. Do you have any other mole or vole deterrent suggestions? So this is from Connie. She says that her church garden crop was totally feasted upon by those rodents. So any other deterrents?
Cats,
Okay.
wild critters.
Yeah. I used traps. So that helped.
Traps, 5-gallon pail full of water.
Yeah.
But then you got to have the bait that goes in the traps,
Mhm.
or put the traps on the run where the critters are running. Usually they run right for the good food.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But go ahead.
I was just gonna say your picture is so cute. Like I don't want to, hurt them. They just look adorable in there.
And they're too small to eat.
Yeah. So
Oh,
yeah, I've seen pictures of people that put that hardware cloth all the way down in their raised bed, down the side and on the bottom. And so I would say prepare the bed. If you have to do it in a raised bed, make sure you do the hardware cloth. So, because it has been successful. So if they can't get in there, they won't be able to wreck them.
Mice and voles are searchers. They're constantly moving all over the place. And so if they can't move to a location to smell or find something, that's your first deterrent, blockade.
okay. That's good. All right. Rich, do you rotate where you plant your slips each year?
Absolutely. I rotate everything
Okay.
counterclockwise if it's of any importance. I don't know why, it just seems to work out that way. So wherever beans were growing, I put my cabbages in. Wherever cabbages, it goes round in a circle. All in I have a space about 50 by 50 feet. And so it's pretty easy to rotate things round and round and round. But I never grow something in the same place. And some things I try to even stay away from growing in the same place or nearby. You can see the diagonal where the broccoli is. Those are heavy feeders right in there. And so I try to move them, even though they're clockwise going around. I try to keep those as well as Brussels sprouts. Brussels sprouts are a real heavy feeder. Things that don't feed as much are potatoes. The entire lower section right down there, those are all Kennebec potatoes. And look at how thick the leaves are in between those guys. Some people say that you've got to dig your dirt and throw them on the top of potatoes as they're growing. I don't do that. I just throw more leaves in, probably 1.5 feet of leaves. And I don't have any greening of my regular potatoes at all. There's no light that can get through and wreck it. And in the beginning of the year, it's real easy to keep your lettuce in good shape because lettuce likes cool weather. And with a whole bunch of leaves around those lettuce plants, heck, you don't have to worry about them getting fried out by the sun at all. They just love it. Way in the back there on the upper right is where the sweet potatoes were going to start for this coming year. They haven't even started to grow very far yet at all. Based on the growth of the other plants, you can see how slow the sweet potatoes start. And way in the back, you see those fences on the upper left there. That's where pole beans are going to be growing. And there's no pole beans there. That's because it's early. It's way, way early in there.
Oh, look at that. All right, so Rich, I'm going to have you put your teacher hat on because Judy needs some advice. All right, so Judy would like to put sweet potatoes in a corner raised bed that's approximately 4 by 4 by 5. 4 by 4 by 5.
Okay.
4 foot by 4 foot by 5 feet. How many plants could fit into that a space that large?
Well, here's a question for her. Here's a question for you, Judy. How far up? Let's see, how do I put this? That location, 4 foot wide, would fit in by 5 foot long, would fit in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That would put about 10 sweet potato plants would be going in there, but you have to consider how far about away from that area, away from that 4 by 4 by 5 dirt, are you willing to have vines go out? If you look on this slide here, there's a space between, yeah, help me with the cursor there. That whole area there measures about 7 feet by 8 feet. And I got 7 plants in there. And by the time I harvest, that whole area is filled with sweet potato vines. So if you have a 4 by 4 by 5 area, and you don't want those vines to consume anything else outside that area, I would only put 6 sweet potato plants right down the middle of it. In other words, 2 feet from the side in and 5 feet long, all the way 5 feet long, about 6 slips put into that area. That will give the vines a chance to grow out 2 feet on either side, and they'll grow even 2 feet beyond that. If it's a raised bed, they'll hang over the edge, they'll get in your grass. They won't hurt the grass. So if you're okay with letting the grass grow in between the vines, hey, so what? The vines are just looking for more light, more sun, more fertility. And if you're willing to put 6 plants right down the middle of that 4 by 4 by 5 area and let them spread, then you'll be okay.
Great. Okay, do you put anything in your soil to amend it before you plant the slips?
No.
No.
I've built up fertility over in this location. I've lived here for about 24 years. And in that 24 years period of time, I've dug in and rototilled, maybe 20 trailer loads. In terms of yards, I'd probably put in 50 yards of horse manure many, many years ago. And I've rarely had to add anything other than leaves since then. I have used mill organite once or twice, spread very thin. And I've used 10-10-10 fertilizer very rarely over some of the areas. Like when I grow onions, I'll sprinkle a little bit of 10-10-10 in between the rows of onions. I've peed around the external area of my garden to keep the critters away.
Okay.
Let's see what else. That's about it. Mostly leaves and natural things that I dig in. I usually fork them over, but I recently had some back problems, and so I don't fork things over anymore because that's too tough for me. But prior to that, all this leaf litter that's on top, I bury. Just fork it in, flip it over, fork it in, flip it over. That'll take about a week's worth of flipping time in this space. Organic matter is the best.
Okay.
You're recycling through nature. Whatever the leaves have produced, you're putting back into the soil to fertilize.
Well, and that's a great segue into the next question. Do you put the vines in your compost bin after harvesting the potatoes?
Yes,
Okay.
the vines don't deteriorate very rapidly. And so if they don't deteriorate at all by the springtime, I'll drag them out of the compost pile with a heavy forked, those wide fork tipped rakes, those steel ones. I'll drag them off and I'll burn them. The rest of the leaves stay in the compost.
Okay. Do sweet potatoes require any extra water, more than 1 inch a week?
Not if you cover things with black plastic.
Okay.
My soil here, I test every 2 years, and my humus percentage, I think, is about 5%. If you get your soil tested and it's mostly clay and sand, then you're going to have to amend it somehow, dig in organic matter, probably not fertilizer. Sweet potatoes don't seem to need fertilizer at all, but what they do need is a loose soil so that when the potatoes are expanding, they don't meet resistance like heavy clay that's dried out. And thus, again, the mulch on top of things to keep the soil fertile.
Okay. All right. Another question. If I left slips on potatoes for a long time, are there any issues? So this person left one outside for several months growing in a pot with some water. Do you think it's safe to still take the chance to take the slips off to grow the sweet potato, or will it go bad after that long?
Well, if I understand it correctly, a harvested sweet potato or a sweet potato from the store, an existing sweet potato, is stuck in dirt and it roots, and then it produces vines and things. I have done that. I've put a whole sweet potato that was extra in dirt, like back here, and let it grow over the winter in the house. And in the springtime, I took that whole pot full of dirt and put it boom, in its own little place in the garden. And at the end of the year, I found that the sweet potato that started all of the vining rotted out. And that particular planting didn't produce many, if any, sweet potatoes that are substantial in size like you see on this slide.
Okay.
So to answer the question, break off those vines, stick them in water, let them root, plant the rooted vine rather than the whole sweet potato.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, we have, let's see, this person tried a different curing method this year. They placed the potatoes in a single layer in a plastic grocery bag. There were a few holes punched into it, and then left them in the plastic grocery bag in the warmest, sunniest room for about 10 days. So now they're each wrapped in newspaper and stored in a milk crate in the basement. So
did it work?
I think so. That was from Mary. So Mary, if you want to answer, go right ahead and unmute yourself.
The question would be, did the sweet potato get a durable skin, and did the sweet potato get sweeter? If it did, do it again.
Okay. All right, excellent. So that was one. And then Gloria said for your challenge of creating a different spot for curing in the basement, she said, how about a metal trash can? That seems like that might be a way to get it to work.
As long as you can get a little ventilation in there. You don't want rain coming down so that it's so humid in there that it starts to rain on the sweet potatoes. That could cause them to rot. Some people also have asked whether or not you wash your sweet potatoes at the end of your season, or if you just dig them and leave the dirt on, like many people grow their onions and leave the dirt on the onion, or grow garlic, leave the dirt on the garlic also. I've done it both ways. And this year I didn't take any dirt off of any of them. So when the dirt starts to dry, I just rub them a little bit, and I can tell right away that the skin is tough. If you tried to rub the soil off of the sweet potato, as soon as you dig it, you'll see that the skin gets scratched real fast and easy.
Mm. Okay. All right. Also from Connie. Connie grew some sweet potatoes and trained the vines up onto the fencing. So her vines went up. But then the deer feasted on the vines and her crop was not great. So
They love them.
yeah.
Yeah.
So does your husband have a rifle with a scope?
So Connie's wondering if the deer's midnight snacks on the vines, could that reduce the production? Like, are those vines necessary for production?
Absolutely. The more vines you get, the better your sweet potato crop. So tell Connie, hello Connie, put some more fencing around those sweet potato vines that are climbing on a trellis. Keep the deer away from them. They're opportunists. They won't knock your fence down unless they're really hungry. So if you enclose them in their own fenced area, they won't be able to get to them. It's the same principle as the 1/2 by 1/2 inch wire on the ground. Keep the voles off. Keep 4 by 4 inch netting, like pig fencing, around the vines climbing up the sweet potato vines. If I know Connie, if it's Connie Holzmiller, she'll probably have a raised bed. So she could put a fence around the entire raised bed area, and that should keep the deer out. Either that or firecrackers. Throw a couple of firecrackers.
Well, and that really takes us to Deanna's question, and maybe you just answered that. So Deanna wanted to know, could you nip the vines back so more juices go to the potato? But
No.
clearly not if the
No.
vines are necessary, correct?
The more vines you get, the better your sweet potatoes are
Okay.
going to be.
All right. If someone hasn't harvested their sweet potatoes yet, can they just cover them up to protect from frost right now until they have a chance to dig them up?
Very dangerous. If frost hits the sweet potato vine, that frost is going to travel down the vine into the sweet potato and start to rot it. If it has not been frosted yet, Carolyn and Mike have great luck with hoop houses, but if you put a plastic over the top of it for the night times, I would raise the plastic up no more than 6 to 8 inches above the vines and make it black plastic so that heat is contained within there during the day. I wouldn't trust it now at all, to be honest. I would think that our growing season is pretty much over. We've had 2 freezes where I live right here. I think Carolyn's had freezes also. And as soon as those vines start to get hit by frost or freeze, that's going to travel right down the vine to the sweet potato in the soil.
Okay, so as quickly as possible, they should get those up if they're still good. Okay, another question from Connie. Connie's full of questions. That's great. Love you, Connie. Should the soil be soaked prior to covering with the black plastic?
Don't need to.
No.
You don't need to, depending on the soil itself. If it's real sandy, yeah, that would help. If it's got a reasonable amount of humus, clay, and sand together, like most garden dirt, no, you don't need to, because as the sun hits that black plastic, there's going to be condensation that occurs. There's a circle of water that goes on underneath the black plastic. Whatever moisture is in, even 6 to 10 feet out from that, is going to be capillary action traveling right to that area underneath the black plastic, and it'll condense right back down into the soil. So what goes up comes back down, up, down, and keeps that soil moist.
Okay, great. And then somebody had mentioned that they purchased slips locally from the Brintag farm. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Right in Oconomowoc this spring. But we had another question. Is there a great place or source to purchase them?
Through the mail is the least reliable
Okay,
because of the mail taking a while for you to get it. Usually they're wrapped in some sort of moisture retaining solution. There's a chemical that goes onto newspaper. And the first time I got slips, that's what happened. They sent me a whole bunch of them that were wrapped in this wet like newspaper. And some worked, some didn't work, some died, some didn't die. And I stuck them in dirt right away and tried to nurture them. So the mail order, I think, is the least reliable, although it's sometimes the only place where people can get slips. The most reliable is to have some friends, you know, like Carolyn or Richard or Connie. Because now you got it right. It's growing. It's growing. You can take these things right here. We can have a whole little community. You can take the tips off of these guys right here and stick them in water. And now you got another plant as soon as it roots. Anybody that you know in the area that's growing these things, hi, how are you? Do you need a 6-pack or a bottle of wine? Oh, by the way, I could use a vine tip with some sweet potato roots.
okay. Well, and the person who had asked, oh, Gloria says, can you mail her some to San Diego?
Oh.
Not
Yes.
likely.
Not likely. Is there, okay, so if Gloria is looking to get some in San Diego and does not have a local farm or a friend who has them, is there a mail order company that you all really like?
Yeah, write this down, San Diego. I didn't catch their name. What was it? Gloria?
Gloria.
Gloria, write this down. Got a pencil? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ready? Sandhill Preservation. I don't know if they're still in business.
Sandhill Preservation,
Yeah,
SAN for San.
yep. All one word, Sandhill.
Okay.
Here's another one. Fedco, FEDCO.
Okay.
There's another one. Johnny's Seeds.
Okay.
Those are 3 I would trust.
Okay. Good. Good. And there's been some conversation in the chat that agree with those. So that's great. But also more got from the Brintag farm. So, all right, good.
You know, the popularity of growing sweet potatoes lately has made it more difficult in our local area to get reliable slips. And the more we learn about how to grow these things, the more the excitement is going to be when you taste the homegrown flavor of your own sweet potatoes. It's incredible.
It is.
It's a normally grown southern crop that's shipped up here after it's been partially cured down there. Why would you do that if you can grow your own and it's so easy?
Mm-hmm.
The plant takes very little requirements. Little bit of maintenance, big deal. No more maintenance than you'd give a bean.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that actually is a good segue into this question from Rose, lives all the way up in Menasha. Are the Georgia slips going to work up here?
How's
So
their
that's-
soil? If the soil is very sandy up there, I would recommend burying everything under the sun and letting it rot there for a couple of years. You have to have a good amount of humus in your soil. Now, by a good amount, that's, you know, it's hard to describe that unless you stick your hand in it after it's been wet down for a while. If you can stick your hand in there and pull it up and start to squeeze it around, you can kind of give it an idea of what's there. If you stick your hand in soil and you squeeze it and now you've got yourself clay, well, that's not good. You break up clay by adding a little bit of plaster or a lime into the soil. Adding sand into the soil is good, but if your soil is sandy to begin with, then you've got to add humus. It's about balance. You need a little bit of clay to hold moisture. You need a little bit of sand for permeability so the water goes through and doesn't stay there. And you need humus to provide all those nutrients. So you got to analyze your soil. If you send your soil through to the university extensions, they'll give you an analysis of what you got in your soil.
Mhm. Good. And we talked about that a lot during our garlic presentation, which is on our YouTube channel. So if somebody wants to know how to get your soil tested, that's towards the end of that presentation.
Yeah.
And Carolyn, maybe we should just do a presentation on soil testing. We can just put a quick little video on how to. So. Okay, so Mary says that Mary is in Appleton and has great luck growing them. So, and they add compost and leaves each year.
You know,
And
this is about forming a network. You know,
Yeah.
we're hearing of people in San Francisco, Menasha, okay,
San Diego, yep.
get together, get your network going.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Judy's question is, she knows we're talking sweet potatoes, but those mail order companies that you mentioned, are those good sources for other plants like strawberries, asparagus, those types of things?
Sandhill Preservation is mostly sweet potatoes and a few other things. And I don't know if they're still in business because I got things from them probably 10 years ago.
Okay,
Johnny's is excellent. Fedco is super excellent.
okay.
They will sell you organic seeds as well as inorganic seeds. And many people nowadays are getting into this organization called No GMO stuff. We don't want to deal with anything that's scientifically futzed with at all. We want to keep as many organically healthy things as possible. The science is not in yet whether or not these things are good for our guts. So we want to keep poisons out of our guts, and we don't want to futz with any genetic material that is not yet proven to be able to be tolerated or change us for the worse. So if you look at the seed company's initial statements of how they treat their customers, do we sell any GMO things? Yes or no. Some people will give you the political answer of everything except the answer, and some will not. So I would go with anything that is trustworthy. Fedco will give you that information right off the top on the first page. And it's a farmers cooperative, so I trust them. They're in the business to keep their business healthy, not destroy it, not to make a profit, but to make people healthy. And Johnny's is pretty much the same way, but a little bit more business-like, but they're very honest. I would trust honesty and forthrightness more than I would trust some other ones. I won't mention some other seed companies that I've had bad luck with or been lied to. I won't share any of that stuff, but I will unabashedly share the ones I've had good luck and honesty with.
That's excellent. And Rose just, and I'm shortening your name to Rose. I apologize if it's not Rose. So on the chat with everybody's names, it's hard to tell. But Sandhill Preservation out of Iowa is still in existence. So that's great to know. And we have friends here from Minnesota too. So this is great. And also noted was Seed Savers Exchange in Missouri is great for heirloom seeds.
Yes, a little expensive.
Yeah, so, okay, well, that is all the questions we got. And seeing that we're right up at 7:30, I want to thank you, Richard and Carolyn, so much for sharing your knowledge with us and your pictures and the visit into your garden. And I'm really excited to see what you come up with next. So.
Carolyn's the magician with this Zoom thing and the as well as you are, Joanna. This electronic stuff evades me because I'm old, but Carolyn is the PowerPoint master.
Oh, well, you're out in your garden. That's all we need you to do.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah.